everyone, my name is Sarah. Welcome back to my channel, and today we are conducting a little experiment. Have you ever added a book to your Goodreads only to find that it has a super low average rating and you got that sinking feeling that you wasted your money and that the book is gonna suck, and then you put it on your shelf and you never read it because you're so put off by this low average rating? I know I have, but I also know that I tend to love books with low average ratings. In fact, I just posted a video about 12 books with really low average ratings that I loved. So I thought to myself, why don't I do a video series where I read 5 of the lowest rated books on my TBR per genre and decide if I think they're underrated, maybe even overrated, or fairly rated, to kind of figure out how much Goodreads and Storygraph ratings even mean, you know? So, for this first episode, I read It Rides a Pale Horse by Andy Marino, I Died Too, But They Haven't Buried Me Yet by Ross Jeffrey, Stringfellow by Simon Jacobs, The Deading by Nicolas Belapres, and Supplication by Noor Abi Nakour. So, if you want to hear my thoughts on these books, please keep watching and subscribe to my channel so you don't miss any new episodes in the series. Like if you enjoyed it, it really helps out the algorithm, especially if you have like a really small channel. And without further ado, let's get into the first book. Hitting you with absolutely atrocious lighting, fresh out of the shower and without glasses in the second clip of this vlog is quite a bold choice on my part, but I have a reading update for you. I am now 63% of the way through It Rides a Pale Horse by Andy Marino. I'm reading this on my Kindle. This is the book I decided to start with because I have read from Andy Marino before. I recently talked about his other book, The 7 Presentations of Sydney Burgess, in my lowly rated books I love video, shameless plug. So yeah, I already knew I liked his writing and I liked his stuff, and also this is the second longest book I have to read for this video, so I decided to just get it out of the way. It also just so happens that this is the highest rated of the books I will be reading for this. It Rides a Pale Horse follows a sculptor named Lark, and he lives with his sister, a painter named Betsy, in this small town. We know that prior to the events of this book there has been some sort of incident involving Betsy and her art that the townsfolk never really forgave her for, but we don't know what it is. Lark believes he's going to sell a sculpture to these really rich and powerful people, but when he gets there he is told that his sister has been kidnapped and he is given this occult manuscript and told to build a sculpture exactly how it says in the text to get his sister back. So I am enjoying this. I think it's so funny. I've been like kind of looking into occultism recently, not necessarily as a belief system or as like a religion for me, but I'm interested in it as a writer and also like just scholarly. I think it's an interesting topic, so I think it's really funny how the first book I'm picking up for this has this occult connection and theming to it. I'm assuming there's some sort of apocalyptic end goal to the construction of this sculpture because of the title, because to me this seems to allude to this description of the horsemen of the apocalypse in Revelations. So I'm assuming that's kind of where we're going with all of this. So yeah, I am enjoying this book, but it's really confusing. There's obviously some sort of magic in this world. Betsy has some sort of ability concerning her art, and there's of course the occultism aspect to it. So there's obviously some sort of magic in this world, but that's not explained at all. So the world building is really confusing to me because there is no mention of other people that are able to do what Betsy does. There is no explanation of how it works or what exactly she can do. So I'm finding that very confusing, and I'm finding it really hard to picture when they describe her work. Every now and again there will be these museum interludes that are from a different character's point of view, and they're very long. They're like 30 plus pages each. They are rare, but they're very long. And they follow a different character, and there's such a jarring shift in tone because that character is very, very voicey, and I'm assuming they're kind of supposed to be like a comedic relief in this narrative that I don't find works very well. I find it very, very, very jarring to go with the rest of the writing style or thematically. No, not thematically, tonally, it doesn't go at all. It is such a jarring shift in tone that I'm really not enjoying particularly. And also, they just completely stop the narrative. They bring the book to a screeching halt. And yeah, I don't like that. I think those parts are really not my favorite of parts of this book in particular. The part where I'm at now, weird stuff has also started happening with the town. Roads don't lead to where they're supposed to. People act kind of out of character, and I'm just confused. I don't know how anything works. I don't know why any of this is happening. So I can't really form an opinion on this book yet because I just don't know what's happening. But I like the writing. I think the story is really, really interesting. It is very, very readable. It's very compulsive. It's just these museum interludes that I really don't like reading. I think the characters are fine. They're not particularly interesting. They serve their purpose in the story, right? They're likable enough that you care if they live or die, and that's kind of about it. But that's all I personally need. So I am gonna get ready because I have to run to the store. I need heat protectant and leave-in conditioner and shower gel, actually. So yeah, I just need some stuff from the drugstore, and I want to wear makeup. So I'm gonna go do that. I will probably finish It Rides a Pale Horse tonight, and I will update you with a full review. See you later. Hi, it is much later, and I have now finished It Rides a Pale Horse by Andy Marino, and this was an absolute banger, my dude. I fear some of you just don't get it. I really think some people just don't get it. I gave this a high 4-star, like a strong 4-star. This was so good. All my criticisms that I talked about in my first update to this are still true, though. I stand by all of them. This is confusing and really weird. Is that a stylistic choice and done on purpose? Yes. Does it make for the most interesting? Not interesting. Does it make for the most pleasant reading experience? No. I still found the museum interludes annoying. There are only 3 of them, I believe. But if you take them all together, they're like 90 pages long of this 360-page book, which is quite the chunk. And I just didn't like them tonally. They were too funny or trying too hard to be funny because the humor didn't work for me at all. Not only is the narrator of those sections kind of this comedic relief character, the rich villains are also in those chapters. And they're just these kooky idiots. Like, these incompetent rich idiots. And I just tonally, I didn't like that. I'm guessing there's some sort of commentary here about how they're messing with something they don't understand, etc. But just didn't really care very much. However, the museum interludes do give us exposition about this plot and about how the world works that we need. Do I think it's the most elegant way to convey that information? No, I absolutely do not. But I don't really have an alternative either. I somehow completely omitted this in my first update for this book, but this book is so gory. Honestly, a lot more gory than I would expect from a mainstream published book like this. So the gore in this is absolutely gnarly. It truly is. But it does serve a narrative purpose. The gore in here isn't just bloody and gross and like for shock value, there is a point to it. There is a scene in this book involving a cow, so big trigger warning for this book for animal death and child death. But the scene with a cow is one of the most disturbing things I have read in a book in a good while, and it will really stick with me. That was probably my favorite scene in this entire thing. It was so kind of disturbing and spooky and also unexpected. I really didn't think it was gonna go in a direction like that. I didn't think this was gonna go that far because this book starts out tame. But yeah, it gets really gory really quickly. The only the scene I didn't really like because of the gore was towards the end, where something really, really gory happens, but it's gory to the point where it becomes physically impossible and really, really unbelievable. And that completely took me out of the story for like a second, and I had to like kind of find my way back. If you enjoyed Call of Cthulhu, the video game from 2019, not the original, or The Sinking City, I actually don't remember when that came out, 2021? Is that too recent? Or The Sinking City, if you enjoyed that, I think you could really like It Rides a Pale Horse. All three of those narratives are like very, very modern interpretations of Lovecraft. And Call of Cthulhu and It Rides a Pale Horse have this connection of art in common. In Call of Cthulhu, it's more painting. Oh, actually, it's painting in Call of Cthulhu and It Rides a Pale Horse. What am I talking about? And I do feel like there is a Lovecraft story that explicitly involves a painting, but I can't think of it. I have read a lot of Lovecraft in my day, not all of his work. So yeah, I would have to kind of look that up and put it in a pinned comment or something. So yeah, very, very modern, very Lovecraftian, very weird, very unexplained, confusing, unlikable and somewhat flat characters, but that is also like in the tradition of the genre it's trying to emulate. I think when it comes to, this is a tangent, but bear with me, when it comes to modern interpretations of Lovecraft, you have the weird and the new weird, which are separate genres, obviously, and you have the horror tradition that really tries to emulate the aesthetic of Lovecraft, maybe without falling into the genre of the weird, if that made any sense. Anyway, I really enjoyed the writing in this as well. Andy Marino is very, very precise, which works especially well in those descriptions of gore and of bodies and of body horror in a lot of ways. Yeah, this book is very body horror, but in a deconstructed way that you wouldn't really expect, I guess, from the genre. Yeah, I really, really enjoyed this. I think there is so much in here, and it's really not that long of a book. It's really easy read. I thought this was great. Now, I really, really want to read the book he has coming out in November, but that's bug horror about cicadas, and that scares me, because personally, I find cicadas really, really gross. I know they don't do anything, I just think they kind of look gross. But yeah, I do want to get to that soon. So, yeah, we have our first win for this video. I thought this book was great. I also have a tiny book haul for all of you, because I just got 4 books in the mail. I got Autobiography of Bread by Anne Carson in this beautiful new vintage classics edition. This is a novel in verse inspired by Greek mythology about a little boy who's a monster named Geryon. What I don't understand about this new edition, the print in this is so small. I don't know why they couldn't have made the print slightly bigger, but yeah, that's fine. I have never read from Anne Carson. I've, like, not a complete story or a complete piece of writing, but I have seen snippets of her work around, and I think it was absolutely beautiful. So yeah, super, super excited to get to this. I also got Toward Eternity by Anton Hur. This is a literary sci-fi. This takes place in a world where cancer has been completely cured by replacing the cancer cells with android cells. Anton Hur is a translator. He translates a lot of Korean fiction, and he translated Cursed Bunny by Porat Chung, which is one of my favorite books of all time. So of course I was gonna buy this when I found out that he's having a book coming out this year. So yeah, super excited to get to this. And the last 2 books I have are anticipated 2024 horror releases. The first one I have is Smother Moss by Alyssa Ellering. This is about Sheila and her sister, and they live with their great aunt somewhere in Appalachia. I think they live really isolated and grow their own food and stuff like that. And this takes place in the 1980s. And then 2 woman hikers are brutally murdered. So I think there's a serial killer on the loose. I have heard that the synopsis of this book doesn't actually match its contents very well. So take that as you will. This is definitely not my favorite cover of this book, but it's the one that was easily accessible, and I'm really, really excited to read this. So that's Mother Moss. Last but not least, we have one of my most anticipated releases of this entire year, and that's Sacrificial Animals by Kaylee Peterson. This is about a pair of brothers who are in no contact with their family, or maybe only their father. But when their father is dying, they return to the community that they grew up in, and I'm assuming some sort of sacrifice ensues. I think this is like religious horror / cult horror, and I'm so excited to read this. You will be seeing either smother moss or sacrificial animals, or both, in an upcoming vlog in November / early December. So, yeah, that's everything I wanted to tell you. I will talk to you when I have an update on a different book. Bye-bye. I decided to go with I Die Too, But They Haven't Buried Me Yet by Ross Jeffrey next for 2 reasons. One, this is the only other book that I'm reading for this video that has above a 3-star average rating on Goodreads, and this was a birthday or Christmas gift from my beautiful boyfriend, so I've had this since at least February, and it's now the end of October. I am 100 pages into this, and I don't like it. This is about Henry, and Henry's daughter disappeared 12 years ago. And ever since then, he has been burying her possessions in like little graves as like an to cope, because he doesn't have any body to bury because she has just disappeared. So Henry sucks. He is horribly misogynistic and incredibly homophobic. He calls people slurs, both to their face and like in text messages, and he is in this grief self-help group that he goes to for some reason. He hates everyone there. He's incredibly cruel to everyone there and how they choose to cope with their grief. And he doesn't open up at group either, so why is he there? And we also follow his best friend named Josh, and they met at this grief group. And I think what Jeffrey is trying to do is that Josh is kind of the positive masculine equivalent to Henry, because Josh isn't outwardly hateful. He never really stops Henry, but you know, guess that's besides the point. But even like good guy Josh, his wife died of ovarian cancer, and the way he talks about her is so gross. I'm looking for the exact quote I want to read to you. Basically, he flips houses for a living, so he is constantly confronted with like the happy family life of other people, and he really wanted to be a father. And because his wife died of ovarian cancer, they of course couldn't have children, which is tragic. And I understand that this is tragic, but the way he talks about his dead wife is so uncomfortable to read. And I really didn't like it. Wait, I'm looking for the exact quote to kind of give you an idea of what I'm talking about. Okay, so yeah, I found the quote I wanted to share with you. This is about his dead wife, and he flips houses, as I just mentioned, and he gets rid of like whatever the family had there. And he is getting rid of like a child's drawing through their eradication, in parentheses, these memories that are in the house. The wound had been struck by his dead wife and her infertile womb. Ew, that's such a weird ways to phrase it. Like, of course it's tragic that he really wants kids and that this is being denied for him, right? But the way he's it's so icky. And then later, on that same page, we have this quote. He had never been given the chance to chart his unborn baby's growth on an app, comparing it to various fruits and vegetables, which was apparently the norm, because there had never been a baby. The womb, which was to carry it, had been declared a hostile one by the cancer, which had grown there, and he had no wife left to carry a baby to term. I'm not being crazy. That's an insane way to talk about your dead partner, right? That is insane behavior. And like, he keeps reducing his wife to her womb and like to her inability to reproduce. And it makes me so uncomfortable. So both of the characters you follow in here suck. And we have just been introduced to a new character named Rowan. He just kind of shows up at Grief Group one day. And I have a feeling where this book is going. And if this book has the plot twist that I am predicting it has, I'm going to hate this. And I would be very upset. Um, so yeah, so far so bad. I will let you know when I know anything more about this. Very possible that the next update you will see about this book is a rant review. So yeah, wish me luck with this, and I will talk to you later. Bye bye. Okay, it is really late and I've had this makeup on for many hours, so if I look really tired and kind of messed up, that's why. I have finished I Die Too, but they haven't buried me yet, and I'm making this update now because I know by tomorrow I will not want to sit down and talk about this. I hated this. 1 star. In fact, I would argue that a 3.2 average rating is really, really generous for this. What I was worried about happening in this book happened, and he somehow managed to make it worse. So first I will give you like a spoiler-free review, because I think even without that twist this would have been an annoying 2-star at best, but probably a 1. I don't give a shit about Henry. I was hoping he would die the entire time. I don't give a fuck about Josh. I don't know why he was in this book. I know he was supposed to be like the positive counterpart to Henry, but he's basically just as bad. He's just not as outwardly hateful, so what was the point of that? What else? This is horribly written. There are just errors in the writing. Ross Jeffrey obviously doesn't know how to use a semicolon or a comma or a full stop. There are run-on sentences that are entire paragraphs long, and beyond that, the writing is just bad. It is really, really repetitive, and it is really, really repetitive. There are certain turns of phrases that show up over and over again, and there are certain turns of phrases that will show up over and over again in the same chapter, which is really irritating to read. Sometimes he will use the same word multiple times per page, multiple times per paragraph, or even multiple times per sentence, which I think is crazy work. Genuinely feels like no one edited this, because someone should have caught that. But like, besides all of the genuine errors in this writing, it's also just bad. I'm gonna read you a description of someone crawling over a broken glass. His fingers led the way, dancing over the glass like a blind man reading Braille, if the book he was reading was called Pain and Suffering. That's so dumb. And that's how the writing in this book is for 307 pages. So yeah, this is my spoiler-free reasons why this is a 1 star. I will put a border around the screen now, and when that border is disappeared, the spoiler section is over, and you can unmute me, or you can skip forward until that's done. Or you can skip forward to the title card of the next book, if you must. So, why was this a 1 star? Basically, Henry's daughter Elsie disappeared 12 years ago, and a new young man named Rowan comes to their self-help group. And from the beginning, Rowan is described, unfortunately, and very, I don't know. It is described how he has this patchy prepubescent beard, and how they keep talking about how feminine his hands are, and how he has these feminine girl hands. So I was already like, my alarm bells were ringing that the twist in this was going to be that Rowan is Elsie, and that the reason she left is, the reason he left rather, is so he could get the gender affirming care that he needed. And that does happen to be the case, which already horrible, but it's worse, because Rowan isn't just a trans man, he is a alter that Elsie created due to the rejection of her father. So Elsie is still like in Rowan's body, and Elsie still communicates with other people, and Rowan is the evil alter that is kind of repressing Elsie. So the trans man alter, the male alter, is repressing the docile feminine alter, and which then implies that he forced Elsie to go through the physical transition, right? Because Elsie still uses she/her pronouns. So you see my problem here already. It is also heavily implied that Elsie originally left home because she's a lesbian. It doesn't seem to be the case that it doesn't seem the case that Rowan was always a trans man. It seems like Elsie was rejected for her sexuality, and then created the alter of Rowan to cope with that. So Elsie isn't trans. It is just the alter that she has created, which is trans. So there is, of course, this intrinsic combination of mental illness and transness in this book. And also the way Rowan acts in this makes transness seem more like demonic possession than a genuine identity. And, I could maybe not find this malicious, but there is a second gender non-confirming character in this very early on that Henry gets into a physical altercation with, and they also use we pronouns to refer to themselves, implying that they also have some sort of identity disorder, some sort of DID. So this happening twice in the same book, concerning. Also, another thing that I find really confusing, Henry is a homophobe, right? That's what this book like keeps hammering him. He's horribly homophobic. But if he sent Elise away because of transphobia, that is two different modes of oppression. Of course, transphobia and homophobia are related, but they are not the same thing. And this book equates them in very, very weird ways. And I don't know what anyone was thinking in the process of making this book, because other people must have read this. There must have been beta readers. This has a publisher. This isn't self-published. This is a small published book. This is an indie press published book. So other people read this, and no one told him, like, hey Ross, what the fuck are you doing? And my biggest issue with this is we didn't need the split personality mental illness angle, because Rowan could have just come back to take revenge on his father, on his horribly bigoted father, who tormented him his entire childhood. That would have been perfectly fine. We didn't need any of that. And this book ends with Henry beating Rowan to death, brutally. And then in the last 2 pages, he has this realization that Rowan is who his daughter used to be because he sees his top surgery scars. But this book has already established that Elsie and Rowan are separate entities within this body. So Elsie is in fact not transgender. It is so confusing. This book doesn't know what it's talking about even a little bit. It has social criticism that it doesn't understand. There's also some word choice in here that made me raise an eyebrow. It talks about at one point how Rowan groomed Elsie, which of course in the context of the language around trans people should immediately ring alarm bells for you, as it did for me. Then towards the end there is a little line where Josh tells Henry to be the better man in relation to Rowan, so the better man than the trans man. Then of course there is this constant reference to how Rowan is small and short and has manicured nails and a patchy beard, which is so annoying. And also, whenever Elsie speaks, she sounds exactly the same as she did when she left home at 14. But it is also very clear that Rowan is on T because he is growing a beard. And T, for those of you who don't know, testosterone, for those of you who don't know, changes your voice. So this is physically impossible, and it is also stupid. Rowan is a 26-year-old man, right, when this book takes place. So why do we have to describe him like a teenage boy? I know what you're doing, Ross Jeffrey, and it's not subtle at all. In general, this book has all the subtlety of a sledgehammer. I know that this prides itself in being grief horror or whatever the fuck, but the grief in this is not interesting because there's all telling and no showing. If you took a shot every time the words grief and trauma are on the page, you would be dead by chapter 2. This sucked. It sucked so bad. Also in the acknowledgements, there is something that made me raise an eyebrow. Here he's talking about the publisher, right? Clash Books, thank you for your enthusiasm for this book. When I wrote, I died too, but they haven't buried me yet. I knew it needed a publisher who got the book and who got me. It needed a publisher who was brave and progressive, whilst also being intelligent about being progressive, and I found that in you. What the fuck does that mean? What the hell does this mean? Intelligent about being... What are you trying to say? What are you implying here? This is transphobic. This is a transphobic book. And I know that, like, I don't think the intention necessarily was to be transphobic. I think this was supposed to be like a come to Jesus moment for Henry, that, wait, trans people are actually people. But throughout this book, Henry doesn't hate trans people, he hates gay people, which is not the same thing. Of course, they're under the umbrella term of queer and of the LGBT community, but it's not the same thing. So this book is so confused about its own message that it ends up getting it wrong completely. And this isn't even touching on the representation of mental health in this, which is obviously horrible and horribly harmful. And it's horribly written. And another thing I noticed, all the positive reviews of this book, the 4 and 5 stars, none of them mention the elephant in the room, which is the twist it is. Not a single person. And another thing, the ending of this book heavily implies that Elsie was always trans, that Rowan has always been a trans man, but still, he is misgendered and dead-named on the very last page of this book. What are you trying to say? This entire book contradicts itself. It doesn't have a point, it doesn't have a message, and it sucks. And it's not like trans people being crazy or trans people being the result of DID systems is a new idea. This started in Psycho. We have seen this for decades, and this book came out in 2023. What are we doing? What are we trying to do here? What else? There was something else that really bothered me about this, and I'm trying to find my thoughts. Also, there are these R.L. Stine Goosebumps-esque fake outs every time something scary happens, because it was always just a dream. Every single time. And it was annoying the first time. Imagine how I'd felt after the 5th time. Stupid book. Yeah, I am baffled that this book exists in this form. I am baffled at every single choice that was made to get this book to where it was, to where it is now. I am baffled that multiple people read this and were like, yeah, this is awesome. Including acclaimed author Josh Malerman, whose quote is on the cover right here. So, yeah, this is so bad. This is garbage. And I'm so annoyed I own this, because I was so excited to read this. And this was like a really expensive indie paperback, and I hated this. There is like another point I was making. Oh, also, all the women in this are horrible. Amanda, who's Josh's dead wife, only serves to be reduced to her reproductive system. That's it. And also, like, her faith and how she saves Josh from suicide by reminding him it's a sin. It's stupid. It's so stupid. Then another woman in their grief group called Harriet, she is really struggling with, like, compulsive masturbation after her husband has died. And this is the butt of the joke throughout this book constantly. Then Elspeth is an old woman, and she is cool because she drinks and she cusses, but she isn't cool because she's incontinent, because she's old. And it's like, and then there's another woman who spends all her time on her phone and on social media because she's a stupid, vapid woman. This is garbage, dude. I'm so mad. I was so cocky too that I was going to love everything in this book, in this vlog, because I typically love lowly rated horror, but Jesus Christ, this was garbage. So yeah, I don't want this in my house. And I will talk to you tomorrow when I have decided what I'm gonna read next. I'm so sorry that I wasted my and your time on this. Good night. Hi, I'm back. I have one more thing to add for I Die Too, but They Haven't Buried Me Yet. It took me a while to figure out how to, like, concisely formulate my thoughts on this book. But what really is my issue with this is that this book employs a lot of transphobic tropes that are very well documented in the horror genre, and that every writer within this genre has to be well aware of. And then it doesn't do sufficient work to subvert these tropes, and then pats itself on the back because at the end the incredibly bigoted main character is really sad because he beat a trans person to death. And that's what rubs me the wrong way about this. This book could have done a lot more work, you know, to get its own point across, and it didn't. And that's a choice to me. And yeah, that's what really, really bothered me about this. And yeah, I don't recommend this, obviously. Okay, yeah, so I'm done now. I will talk to you when I have something to say about a different book. Alright, I am now 263 pages into String Follow by Simon Jacobs. I'm also filming this update for the 4th time because I keep not making sense, or the camera's way too high up, so let's try this again. This is about a group of teenagers in Edina, Ohio. So Claire, Beth, David, Greg, and Sarah. Oh, and Tyler. And this entire narrative kind of revolves around Sarah. And Sarah is this really, really empathetic girl, and she's a people pleaser. And she just really wants to help all of her really troubled classmates. And there is some sort of entity or force that refers to themselves as we that seems to be steering all of these kids into like a specific direction. But we have no idea to what end or why any of this is happening. This is the book I am most confident in liking out of this entire video because Rachel from the Shades of Orange, I'll leave her channel below, gave this 4 stars, and her taste and my taste align more often than they don't. And I have also read the first 50 pages of this before, and I was actually really enjoying the vibes of this. As you can see by the amount of tabs, I actually really like the writing in this. I have also realized that I've owned this for close to 3 years, which is horrifying because I was convinced I bought this last year at the earliest, but whatever. So yeah, what to say about this? Is this really boring? Yes. Is this really slow paced? Yes. Is this about horribly unlikable and sometimes very flat characters? Yeah, yes it is. Is the writing pretentious and annoying and very, very voicey? Yes it is. Am I eating this up? Absolutely, dude. I'm enjoying this so much. And for the last like 30, 40 pages, I've also just been feeling this creeping dread that something is about to happen. And I don't know if it actually will, to be honest, but I feel like we are really building towards something now, and I'm really, really enjoying it. Yeah, this book deals with a lot of stuff that I like in literature. This is about teenage disillusionment and teenagers that are horribly neglected by their parents and because of that really act out. This is about teenagers suffering essentially and all the adults around them just completely ignoring the issue. And yeah, this book is also about teenagers, or I guess people in general, failing to find community in each other. Everyone in this really tends to isolate themselves like emotionally and is like really closed off. One thing I will say, sometimes the descriptions of teenagers in this, or the depiction of teenagers in this, is kind of giving how do you do, fellow kids. But I also want to argue that that is intentional. I want to argue that this book is about like this voyeuristic view on teenage life. But that could be a very charitable interpretation because I'm really enjoying it. So yeah, I really like the writing. I think something is about to happen because there's this creeping sense of dread the entire time. I think it's interesting that this book implies that all of this is kind of by design, but this book never commits to that. This could just be a series of circumstance and coincidence, and that these kids are so desperate to find meaning. I think this is a book about meaning and meaninglessness and who gets to decide what is meaningful and what isn't. And I'm actually really enjoying it. I will finish this today. And then I will talk to you, give you my full review. I do realize that considering I'm almost 300 pages in, I have very little to say about this book. But just trust that I am enjoying it and that I think it's doing interesting things. And I will probably be able to formulate my thoughts on this more when I'm done. So, see you later. Hi, welcome to my living room. You have not seen this part of my apartment before. But this shelf is where my comic books live that I can no longer afford to collect. Also, my boyfriend's books live on this shelf and our board games. I am also so sorry for updating you at like 11 p.m. again, but I didn't have time to film before like right now because life happens. I was also out all day, so if you can hear my cat in the background meowing, that's why he wants attention, and I will give it to him as soon as possible. So, I have finished Stringfellow by Simon Jacobs, and dare I say it, this was 5 stars. Yep. If this confirms to some of you that I have bad taste, that is perfectly fair, because people hate this. As I've done for every book so far, I had a look at the positive and negative Goodreads reviews on this. And a lot of the 1-star reviews are DNFs, because people had no idea what was going on and just didn't want to trudge through this book anymore. And yeah, I can totally see that. This book is longer than it needs to be, I will fully admit that. And there is like a point around 200 pages in where you are really like, why am I reading this? Nothing is happening. So yeah, I totally understand if this was a DNF. I think that's fair. Also, a lot of people, like I said, thought this book was too hard to get into. They didn't understand what was happening. Interestingly enough, the 5-star reviews of this praised that they didn't understand what was happening and that this is very hallucinatory and weird and slow-paced, and that's also what I liked about it. I kept trying to think of comparison titles for this last night to like kind of give you an idea of what to expect here. This is blurbed by Mona Awad, the author of Bunny, All's Well, and Rouge, and by Rachel Ilf Moulton, who wrote Tinfoil Butterfly. I loved Bunny and I really enjoyed Tinfoil Butterfly. I'm not trying to say that Bunny or Tinfoil Butterfly are comparison titles for this, but I think there is a chance if you enjoyed either or both of those books that you will like this one. The one comparison title I could actually think of for this is a movie, and that's called We're All Going to the World's Fair. That's by the same director as I Saw the TV Club, that was pretty hyped earlier this year. And I think if you enjoyed that film, you could really enjoy this book and vice versa. So that's kind of the vibe. I'm really trying to figure out what I liked so much about this book, because I'll be the first to admit that nothing happens in this much until like the very end. And that it's really slow paced and that it can be very boring at times. But something about this worked so well for me. This made me so, like the dread in this was so palpable to me. This was such an intense reading experience. I talked about this in my Lowly Rated Books I Love video, Rambles blog, about The Guest by Emma Cline, that book only works for you if the dread and anxiety it tries to produce works for you. And I think this is the same way. But I know that I can't really recommend a book based on it either works for you or it doesn't. And that's why I'm kind of trying to figure out how to explain why I liked this so much. So as I've mentioned in my first update, I really liked the writing in this. The writing worked for me really well. There are like a few quotes in here that really stuck out to me and that I really liked. Let me see if I can find something that like really encapsulates the writing in this. Let me see. Oh yeah, this is a good one. There is a part of you have to slam shut like a door. That was a quote I really liked. You are a gun drained on the future in time across enough people, a large enough crowd. You can disperse it all of it into nothing. That's another one I thought was great. This is another quote I really liked. It just says, do you ever think about the future? It's pitch black, you have to go through it alone. Because it really encapsulates the anxieties of the characters in this book. They're all like high school age or about to finish high school and go off to college. And they're all terrified, right, of this prospect of this completely unknown future. And this is so filled with teen angst, but it's also so earnest if you are the kind of person that sees meaning in everything and that is very sentimental and that is anxious. I think this could work really well for you if everything means something to you and if you find meaning where others might only see chaos. I think this is a great pick. I alluded to this in my first update, but this really is a book about meaning and meaninglessness, and also how a situation can look entirely meaningless and entirely coincidental, but that there might or might not be some sort of design behind it. So yeah, I know this review sucks, but I really, really enjoyed this book, and I don't know how to talk about it without spoiling it. I think it's also really cool how the title plays into this. String follow is a concept of archery, where essentially, if I understood it correctly, the bow gets bent in the direction that you shoot the arrow in, and then it gets more and more likely to snap. And this book is about teenagers at their breaking points for various reasons. And very late into the book, there is just a line that just says a bow snaps. And yeah, here. There is basically there's a chapter that talks about other teenagers and what they're going through. And then in the middle of that, it just says a bow snaps, which of course only makes sense in the relation to the title. And the writing in this has so many little nuggets like that you really have to pay attention to catch. And in that way, it kind of reminded me of Jawbone by Monica Ojeda, which is another book that I really loved and other people hated. That's about angsty teenagers with really, really beautiful writing. So yeah, I enjoyed the hell out of this, and I'm so excited I read it, and I'm so excited I loved it. And I am so sorry that this ramble was barely coherent. But yeah, I will talk to you when I have a different update. Maybe you'll find a better review of this book in my wrap-up, but I'm not making any promises. So yeah, talk to you later. Hello again. I am now 71% of the way through The Deading by Nicolas Beladres. I didn't update you on this earlier because I didn't really know what to say about it, and I still am kind of struggling to formulate my thoughts on this because I have such mixed feelings on this book. When it's good, it's great. The writing is beautiful. It is really exciting. It really keeps you intrigued. It really keeps you guessing. But when it's not good, it is not good. It becomes extremely boring for pretty long stretches, and this isn't a long book. This is under 300 pages long, but it feels closer to 450. The characters are very flat, and I don't really care about them very much, so it's really a very mixed bag. This is about a small coastal town called Baywood, and a mysterious illness has basically started spreading that causes animals and humans to dead, which is why the book is called The Deading. Essentially, they will fall over and die, and then just get up again and go about their day. And the people that do dead also change in other ways. Their personalities change, and they seem to have this collective consciousness almost. And that doesn't happen until 60% or so. No, that's not true. The deading starts at I think around 45%. And that's what the summary talks about. So if you looked at the summary for this book, it spoiled you for half of it. So that was a choice. Yeah, I am so torn on this. I think the prose is really, really nice. The prose is very beautiful. I don't personally super mind that the characters are flat because I'm a plot-based reader. I've talked about this before. What I will say is that, especially in the beginning of this book, it takes so long for anything to happen. This plot is so slow to start, and I don't know why, because it could have just started right away. But at the beginning of this book, character interactions are really, really weird and really, really stilted. One of the main characters in this, Blas, I don't know how to pronounce his name, I'm so sorry. He is a teenager and he is really into bird watching. And for some reason, all the adults around him have a huge problem with the fact that he's into bird watching. And it was so bizarre to me because why? And his older brother hates birds for some reason and keeps talking about wanting to kill birds. And it's so weird and so random. The world building in this confuses me as well. Because the synopsis tells you that this is dystopian, but the actual text doesn't really let you know that this is not current day. There are a few references to how much more advanced artificial intelligence is in this world, but AI, as far as I am into this book, is also not relevant to this plot at all. So why are we throwing that in there? So the world building confuses me. The choice to make this a future setting confuses me, even though it seems to be a very near future. That confuses me. Oh yeah, the teenagers have some sort of a collective voice in this, and every few chapters will be written like we, as the collective voice of these teenagers, and those are like the chapters I really don't like. They feel kind of out of touch with what teenagers care about and what teenagers are like, and what teenagers feel about each other and their families, and yeah, they just kind of feel out of touch. And at the very beginning of this, there's like a little interlude or like a prologue at the beginning of this book that talks about how deading, so pretending to die, started as an internet trend among teenagers. And then way later into the book turns into a real illness. But like, why did we need that aspect to it? That was bizarre to me because that's something that teenagers would never do. I'm so sorry if you just heard my cat in the background. That is something that I don't see teenagers doing. So lots of choices in this book I don't really fully understand. I have also seen people in the Goodreads reviews be kind of disappointed that this isn't like the comparison titles at all. This is being compared in the marketing to The Last of Us and Under the Dome. And it's nothing like either of those two things. I'm not very familiar with Under the Dome or The Last of Us, but even I can tell that The Deading is nothing like either of those books. If it takes inspiration from any Stephen King, it's probably The Stand. Because in The Deading, during this apocalyptic scenario, different religions and cults prop up, and that's also a theme in The Stand. So in general, this book is way less Stephen King than it is Lovecraft. It is a modern Lovecraftian novel, I think I would say. It is very disjointed in style, which I personally don't mind. I would actually go as far as to say I like that. So yeah, very, very mixed feelings. I don't understand the world building. The characters could be anyone. They're completely interchangeable. Teenagers are written in a very boomery way, but the writing is great. I do like the plot itself. Do I think the idea of the deading is kind of silly? Yes. Do I think he's going somewhere with that? Also yes. So I have like 90 pages of this left. I will finish it and I will talk to you later. By then it will be dark because it gets dark at fucking 5 p.m. now. So talk to you later when I have hopefully a full review. See you then. So I finished The Deading by Nicolas Bellatres last night and I'm still so torn about this book. I settled on like a 3.5 star, but I'm not happy with that. That doesn't feel quite right. Everything I said in my first update to this book still kind of holds. I stand by everything I said. And I want to add to this that I think what this book really suffers from is that it's trying to do too many things at the same time. It's a pandemic book or an epidemic book with the sickness of the deading. It's a science fiction book with like actual like alien stuff going on. It's about government surveillance. It's about isolation. It's probably, in a metaphorical sense, about the failure of government to help certain communities during the COVID crisis. It's about family. It's about teenagers and teenagers being neglected. There's also an author's note at the end that really goes into bird watching and how brown people have been excluded from the bird watching communities in the US. And I know that that's like really shitty and that shouldn't be the case, but I thought it was so jarring to read this book, this like cosmic horror eco-thriller book, and then there's just like 6 pages on bird watching at the end. I don't know. This book also has a really long acknowledgement section that's like 18 pages long where the author kind of goes into his process. And I think that was really good, but that should have been the author's note, or it should have been part of the author's note. Doesn't matter, that's semantics. So I enjoyed the extra content at the end of the book, right? That kind of gave you an insight of what the author was trying to do there. I'm not crazy about the ending of this book. I said the same thing about It Rides a Pale Horse, but this book just kind of fizzles out at the end, but I really don't know what else he was supposed to do with the story because the scope is so big. So, yeah, there is so much in here, and arguably too much, because this is not a long book. This is like 300 pages long. The characters are all very flat. I personally don't mind that very much, but if you are a character reader or if you need to care about characters or root for them, I don't think this is necessarily the pick for you. He does something very interesting in the first half of this book, I find, or I found rather. Basically, will be in one character's point of view. And then in that chapter, a different character is mentioned, usually only in passing. And then the next chapter will be from that character's point of view. And he does that until all the characters are introduced. And I thought that was really cool. I already said that in my first update to this, but we didn't need the collective voice chapters that were in here every now and again. Oh, and we do get chapters from some sort of entity throughout this book, but they just stop in the last third, and either I completely missed something, but I did not understand that, why those chapters just stopped being in this book. The ending also kind of has the magical indigenous person trope that I really don't like. It is a very short scene, which kind of just really shows that we didn't need that. So yeah, I have such mixed feelings about this book. The writing is absolutely beautiful, and I will maintain that. The cover is gorgeous, of course. I want a physical copy of this because, one, I do see myself rereading this at some point, and two, the cover is so gorgeous, but this book is expensive, dude. Both the paperback and the hardback and also the ebook, because I kind of cheated with the dating. I don't own this book. I read this on RANT, but I really wanted to read it, and it had low average rating, and it's my video, so I did it. To kind of recap the points that I was making here. This book has so much going on that it kind of loses sight of itself sometimes, and I think it could have benefited from picking 2, 3, 4 points and sticking to them. That's my first criticism of it. Second, sometimes nothing happens for somewhat long stretches at a time because this is a short book, which I think was a stylistic choice, not necessarily super pleasant to read. 3, the character interactions at the beginning of this book are really strange and really stilted and confusing. 4, the ending just kind of happens. The book just kind of fizzles out. So those are all my criticisms of it. But I have so much praise for this book, genuinely. Another thing, this whole idea of the deading is kind of silly. It's not silly how it's described in the book. I think it's actually really interesting how it's described in the book. But the concept is a little silly. And I think it's also a little silly to tie this back to some sort of online teenager trend that happened prior to the beginning of this book. We didn't need that. Anyway, so those 5 things are like my criticisms of this. But I do have praise for this book. I think this is a good book, and that's why I'm so annoyed of having to give it a 3-star, because this isn't a 3-star. I have so many thoughts about this. It's not just a book I read that was fine. So I think the writing is really good. I think the writing is very beautiful, very nice. Whenever the creature/entity is described, it's kind of word salad in the sense that you really have to pay attention and pick out the descriptors to kind of get any sort of mental image, which I like, but I imagine doesn't work for everyone. What else? I think the escalation in this book is really interesting. We have a small problem that turns into very many big problems very quickly. And I thought that was cool. I think we could have taken our time with that more, though. I think this book could have benefited from being longer or getting rid of 2 or 3 themes. The discussions in here on isolation, religion, abandonment by government, are really cool. I like that we don't get all the answers because this book presents itself as like cosmic horror, very Lovecraftian. And I think getting the answers always takes the punch out of narratives like that. So really, it's perfectly balanced, you know? I liked so much about this book, and I really disliked other stuff, and I hate that I have to like settle on a 3-star, but that's the only like numerical rating I can give you. Truly mixed bag. But that means we have one more book down, and only one more book to go, and it's really short. It's 200 pages long, so I will talk to you when I have an update on that. See you then. Last night I finished Supplication by Noor Abinakul. I'm so sorry for not updating you at the halfway point of this book, but I got to page 100 and I was like, what would I even tell them about here? Everything I'm about to say, I want to preface by saying that I did give this 4 stars. I understood everything in this emotionally, but maybe not intellectually. I don't even know how I would summarize this book for you, really. But yeah, let me try. This follows our unnamed narrator, and she begins this book in a room, in like a small concrete room tied to a chair, and there is this hulking, huge man just standing in the doorway. And then something happens that should maybe have killed her, but she wakes up and begins wandering around this empty, liminal cityscape, perhaps being compelled to do so by something outside of herself. And it's really weird. Today's lesson is when a book tells you that it's weird, surreal, and hallucinatory, believe it, because that's exactly what this book is. I think the prose in here is beautiful. Is it a little self-important? Yeah, but I enjoyed it. I don't know. It also has horrible run-on sentences that are so long that sometimes by the end of the sentence you have to go back to the beginning to reread the entire sentence because you already forgot what happened at the beginning of it. Also found it kind of difficult to be focused on this all the way, all the time. Sometimes I could just feel my eyes glaze over and I would have to reread like entire pages that I just completely missed because they were just not registering with me at all. We are in really cool set pieces in this book. We are in abandoned houses or in this tiny room at the beginning. Later we are in a hospital, but we don't linger on any of this. It is really confusing to follow. I think this book is more so about its themes than about its plot. I interpreted this as being about a woman trying to cope with the violence that was done against her. I think this is also about pregnancy and motherhood and possibly pregnancy loss. That's kind of how I understood this thematically. It's about perception, or rather being perceived. It's about being seen. And in that way, it's also about the male gaze, about the constant observation of women and girls. And it's about always feeling watched and feeling like you have to perform a certain way. This is also about entrapment, both like physical confinement, but also being trapped in relationships or being dependent on substances. So yeah, there is a lot going on in here. It is very short. It's very confusing, very weird. But I think I enjoyed this a lot. I know I'm not really giving you a very good review of this, but that's for a couple of reasons. Number one, this has very little plot to really recap for you. And number two, the summary and all the marketing of this book is really sparse in terms of what that plot is. And I don't want to completely spoil a 200-page book just to get my point across. Who do I recommend this to? Oh boy. This might be very niche. But if you are familiar with indie horror developer Kitty's Horror Show, specifically her games that take place in these weird abandoned cityscapes, this is perfect for you. I know that's so niche and so specific, but if that's a vibe and an aesthetic you like, I would really recommend this. This has a lot of places or spaces that should be full but are empty. So if that's a concept that you find fascinating in horror, I would really recommend this. Also, the way you progress through this book, that you are in one location and then something happens that makes you go to a different location, just in general really reminded me of how video games work, specifically Cry of Fear. Again, this is such a specific comparison title, but in Cry of Fear you start, oh my god, where do you start Cry of Fear? Kind of like in a downtown area, and then you are led to the apartments and so on and so forth. Silent Hill 2 also does this, if that helps you at all. So the only comparison titles for this I can think of at all are video games that are not so much in terms of Cry of Fear and Silent Hill 2, but in Kitty Horror Show's case are very sparse in terms of narrative and very sparse in terms of lore and expect you to kind of just go along with it or figure something out yourself. With books like these, I typically take everything that happens on page at face value at first, and then think about what this might mean. When I'm reading a book that from the beginning tells me it's going to be super surreal and super weird, I don't try to figure it out. I let the writer, the storyteller, take me where I need to go and then think about it after. And so this works for me, right? Because it told me it was going to be weird, and it was weird. So there was no different expectation on my part, if that makes sense. So yeah, I guess if you are into really sparse and weird, small indie horror titles in terms of video games, you could be into this small, weird, not necessarily independently published horror book title. So if that sounds appealing to you at all, I think I would recommend this. I had a look at the reviews, as I've done for all of these books, and it was pretty much what I expected. People thought this was confusing, people thought it was overwritten, lots of DNFs, which again, perfectly fair. I understand if you did not finish this book, and I understand if you hated this book, because this is a very acquired taste, and I know that not everyone has that taste, clearly. It is also written in first person, but the main character in this is, due to her emotional circumstances, very emotionless and empty and doesn't really seem to have a personality. She's just kind of there for everything else to happen. I'm being so vague about this. But she's the type of protagonist that isn't really participating in her own story. And in a first-person narrative that also doesn't have a lot of plot, yeah, that's gotta be off-putting to a lot of people, right? So this book isn't character-focused, and it's also not plot-focused. So what the hell does this book focus on? I think it's theme and writing, you know? So like, yeah, I think it's theme, prose, and that's about it. And so this book is very concept-heavy, very theme-heavy. And in that way, this is a traditional narrative in the sense that it is recognizable as a novel, but out of everything I have read in this video, this is by far the most deconstructed, bare bones, weird thing. The people that did like it said that they really liked the prose, like I did, and that they didn't really mind the weirdness. Or that they liked the fever dream weirdness. Because what this book does really well is emulating what dreams are like. Because there is no logic to anything. The logic that there is to is this dream logic. You have a dream, something really, really weird happens, but your dream self understands that thing immediately and doesn't need it explained, and that's what this book is like. So very scattered thoughts on Supplication. Just know that I enjoyed it and that I will reread this at some point down the line. So let me sit down for some final thoughts on this video and my conclusions. So, class, what did we learn today? I think the most obvious conclusion we can draw from this little experiment is that reading is subjective, but we knew that beforehand, right? I knew that before I ever turned the camera on to film this video. So what else did we learn? As I was thinking and reflecting on this video, I kind of tried to figure out what these books have in common that people maybe don't like. And what I noticed is that the lower the average rating gets, the more nebulous and strange the plot gets, or the less plot the book has. I also noticed that all of these books have unlikable or flat characters in common, and that the lowest rated of these books have really disjointed narratives where you kind of don't really know what's happening, sometimes not even in what order events are occurring or what anything means. So, the unclearer the narrative, the lower the rating. That's my one conclusion I can draw from this. Also, a lot of people seem to just find the unclear and also very voicey books on the bottom half of this list very pretentious and annoying to read. Which honestly, yeah, fair. I think that's an opinion that you can have. I'm just gonna rank the books in this video real quick, and then I think we're out of here. So my favorite video I read in this was String Follow by Simon Jacobs, obviously. Weird, quiet, disturbing, reminded me of A24 movies. My next favorite, I think, is It Rides a Pale Horse by Andy Marino. Crazy gory, but like really, really good gore. A scene involving a cow that I will think about every day for the rest of my life, and that I found like really inspiring as a writer. I thought that was so creative and so interesting, but also really messed up. Then we have Supplication by Noor Abi Nakul. Kind of same thoughts as the first two, very voicey, very pretty writing, very, very weird. Really reminded me of the types of video games I loved. Worked for me great. Then we have The Deading by Nicolas Belabres. I wanted to love this so much more than I did. I am so excited to find out what this author does next, because the writing in this I thought was so, so beautiful. Lots of good stuff going on in that book. Lots of stuff that isn't as good. So we have to kind of meet somewhere in the middle at a 3-star. This has a scene with a mountain lion that I will never forget and that I will think about for the rest of my life. The one really, really scary and disturbing scene to me in that book was that scene with the mountain lion. Lots of animal stuff that I found really interesting. And on the bottom of the pyramid, we have I Die Too, But They Haven't Buried Me Yet by Ross Jeffery. I don't want to get into all of this again because my review in this video told you everything you needed to know. I hated the writing in this because I thought it was bad. There were just grammatical errors in it. All the characters are annoying and unlikable, but unlikable in a way that isn't interesting and that I don't want to read about. And the tropes utilized in this are horribly transphobic, so I didn't like it. I think it's really kind of fun how we had basically every rating from a 1-star to a 5-star in this video. So what that really shows us is that every single book ever has a target audience and has an audience that's going to enjoy it. I think sometimes what happens is that the marketing doesn't communicate well enough who that audience is. Because I believe Supplication was marketed like it has a lot more mass appeal than it does. And String Follow is in a similar kind of vein, where I think that the synopsis gives too much away, and the synopsis already makes it sound really pretentious and annoying, kind of. So I think a lot of times it's just a communication error that are not put into the hands of the readers who are going to really enjoy them. So what did we learn today? Reading is subjective. Every book has an audience. I don't think that's necessarily groundbreaking information, but that's what we learned today. Leave a like if you enjoyed this video. Subscribe if you want to see episode 2, which I'm filming this month in November. And it's about the lowest rated literary fiction on my TBR. And that will be up at the end of this month or beginning of next month. See you then. Bye!